When you get to my age, the years behind you stretch far longer than the years ahead. And though many of those years were filled with love, laughter, and the blessings of family, sometimes life has a way of testing your heart in ways you never imagined. I never thought I'd share this aloud, but maybe my story will help you, or at least let you know that you're not alone in the way the world treats us when our hair has gone silver and our hands begin to tremble. I was born in a little town, far away from the noise of big cities. Back then, family meant everything. My mama used to say, "Children are the jewels in a mother's crown." And I believed her with every fiber of my being. I grew up poor, but I grew up loved. My mother's hands were always busy, sewing, cooking, caring for us. And my father worked himself thin at the factory, coming home smelling of grease and sweat. We had little, but we had each other. I dreamed of the day I would have my own family and love them as fiercely as I had been loved. Even as a little girl, I noticed the way life required work and patience. I remember watching my mother knead bread dough while humming softly, the smell of yeast filling the tiny kitchen, and I thought to myself that this simple act of care was the foundation of the world. We had no riches, no silver spoons, but I felt a kind of wealth that others might never know. The warmth of a home built from hands that loved, from voices that sang in the quiet, from a sense of togetherness that could withstand storms. When I married, I thought life had given me the world. My husband was strong and kind, with a laugh that warmed every corner of our home. Together, we raised our children, my 3 jewels. I remember the nights I went hungry just to make sure there was enough food on their plates. I remember sewing their clothes by candlelight, pricking my fingers raw so that they could walk into school with pride, looking neat and cared for. I took extra jobs, ironing, babysitting, anything I could find, because I wanted them to feel that they had the same opportunities as children born with silver spoons. Every time they smiled at me, every time they hugged me after school, it felt worth it. And how I told myself, these little ones will never let me grow old alone. They will be my comfort in my final years. That's what we mothers believe, don't we? That our sacrifices today are the seeds of love tomorrow. I planted those seeds faithfully for decades, each one buried deep with hope, watered with tears and laughter alike, nourished with the tender devotion that only a mother knows. But seeds do not always grow the way you dream. Life changes people, and the world outside whispers things into the ears of your children that you cannot always protect them from. My husband passed away too soon. Suddenly, the laughter was gone, and I stood alone in a house that seemed too big, too quiet. Still, I found strength in my children. I told myself, they will carry me through. And for a while they did. They visited, they helped, they checked in. But slowly the visits grew fewer, the phone calls shorter, the tone colder. They had their own lives, their own troubles, and maybe in their eyes I had become a burden. I ignored the signs at first. I told myself they were busy, that it was just a phase. But the phase never ended. One day, my eldest looked me in the eye and said, "Mama, you need to stop depending on us. You need to figure out your own way." It felt like a knife twisted in my chest. My own child, the one I carried, the one I nursed, the one I sat up with on nights of fever, telling me I was too much. I tried to stay quiet, to swallow my tears, but they burned my throat. Days turned into weeks, and then came the breaking point. It was a cold evening, the kind that seeps into your bones. I had cooked a small pot of soup, hoping my children would come by, but no one did. Instead, I was told, in words sharper than any blade, that I could no longer stay in the home I had worked so hard to build. "It's not your house anymore," they said. Can you imagine? The walls that had echoed with my lullabies, the floors I had scrubbed on my knees, the table where I had served countless meals. Suddenly, I was a guest unwelcome. I was told to pack my things, that there was no room for me in the life I had once given everything to create. Do you know what betrayal feels like? It isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's like a door closing softly but forever. I stood there, holding the same hands that had once buttoned their coats, wiped their tears, guided their first steps. And those hands now trembled as I tried to gather the little dignity I had left. My heart screamed, but no words came out. I stepped outside with nothing but a small bag, the night air biting at my skin. The world looked different. The stars above seemed colder, the streetlights harsher. I had nowhere to go. I walked for hours, not knowing where my feet were leading me. My body was weary, but my mind raced. How could the ones I gave life to strip me of mine? Every step felt heavier, like I was sinking into the earth. I thought of my mother, long gone, and wondered if she could see me now. Would she pity me, or scold me for depending too much on others? I didn't know. All I knew was that my home was no longer mine, and my children were no longer my shelter. The night grew darker, and the city felt emptier. I passed houses glowing warmly inside, families gathered around their tables, laughter spilling into the air. My heart ached as I remembered my own house once looking like that. But now I was an outsider, peering in at a life that no longer belonged to me. I sat on a bench, the cold seeping through the wood, and I let my tears finally fall. I cried not just for the betrayal, but for the years I had poured out of myself, believing in a promise that had turned hollow. Sitting there, clutching my small bag, I thought of all the nights I had sung my children to sleep, all the mornings I had prepared meals while the world was still quiet. The memories were vivid, and yet they brought both comfort and pain. I thought of the sacrifices I had made, the hours spent keeping a home, the dreams I had tucked away quietly, and I realized how thoroughly life had taught me resilience. But the ache of abandonment was sharp, unrelenting. How does a mother survive when the children she raised with such devotion turn away, leaving her to face the world alone? Hours passed like minutes. The wind whispered through the trees, almost mocking me, reminding me of my solitude. I thought of knocking on a neighbor's door, of asking for help, but pride held me back. I thought of walking to the church, of seeking a quiet corner where I could rest, but my legs were too tired, my spirit too raw. And so I stayed, caught between the life I had lived and the uncertainty of what would come next. I wondered if the morning sun would bring mercy, if the day would offer a kind hand, a stranger's warmth, or if it would bring yet another cruel twist, reminding me that the world does not always honor the years we give to others. Yet even in that darkness I felt a small flicker of determination. If I could survive the night, perhaps I could survive what came after. Perhaps there was a way forward, though I could not yet see it. The morning arrived slowly, pale light brushing the city streets, and I felt the cold of the night still clinging to my bones. Yet With the first gentle rays, there came a subtle reminder. I was alive. My legs ached, my hands trembled, my spirit felt raw, but I had survived. That in itself was something. I rose from the bench, brushing off the frost that had settled in the cracks of the wood, and began to walk again, letting my feet carry me where they would. I wandered through narrow streets, past shuttered shops and quiet houses, the air crisp with the scent of dew and the faint tang of distant bread ovens. Life around me stirred slowly. A cat padded along a fence. A woman carried a basket of laundry. A man whistled as he repaired the hinges of his gate. All of them absorbed in their own worlds, unaware of the small, trembling figure passing through. I felt invisible, yes, but not entirely alone. There was a rhythm to the city, a subtle heartbeat, and I found a strange comfort in moving with it, even if only at its periphery. I came upon a small bakery, its windows fogged with the warmth inside. The scent of bread, yeast, and sugar beckoned me, teasing a hunger I had not properly addressed in too long. I pressed my face to the glass, watching the baker knead dough with practiced hands, shaping it into loaves that would soon feed others. I remembered my own hands, calloused from years of tending to my family's needs, sewing and cooking late into the night. A pang of longing went through me, a reminder of the life I had once held with certainty. I continued walking until I found a square where sunlight pooled across worn cobblestones. A few people had gathered on benches. A child chased a rolling ball, laughter spilling into the morning air. I chose a spot that caught the sun and sat, letting it warm my shoulders. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing in the sounds, the smells, the life around me. And for the first time in hours, I allowed myself to feel the fragile thread of hope stirring. It was then that I noticed her, an old woman leaning heavily on a cane, moving slowly but deliberately, eyes sharp and observant. She stopped beside me, and we sat in silence. Two strangers, connected by some unspoken understanding. Finally, she spoke. "Long night, wasn't it?" Her voice was gravelly but kind. I nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, it was. She smiled gently. "Some nights are heavier than others, but the sun has a way of finding us, even when we feel lost." Her words resonated in me more than she could know. I had felt lost, abandoned, betrayed by those I had loved most. Yet here was someone offering a gentle reminder that life still moved forward even for those cast aside. She rose then, leaning on her cane, and gestured for me to follow. I hesitated, unsure if I could trust, unsure if I was ready to accept help. But some instinct, perhaps the faintest thread of courage, nudged me to follow. We walked together through winding alleys and quiet streets to a small, modest building that radiated warmth from within. The bell above the door jingled softly as we entered, and I was enveloped by the comforting smells of cooking and the soft hum of conversation. She guided me to a table near the window and disappeared into the back, returning moments later with a simple meal. Bread, a small bowl of porridge, and a cup of tea. I ate slowly, savoring not only the food but the reassurance that someone, somewhere, had noticed my need and offered it without judgment. As I ate, memories rose unbidden. The nights spent sewing my children's clothes, pricking my fingers with needle and thread. The mornings when I woke early to prepare breakfast, even when my own stomach rumbled. The evenings when my husband's laughter filled the rooms and my children's voices were light and clear. All of it seemed so distant now. Yet the taste of warm bread and tea reminded me that the present, too, could be gentle. Finishing the meal, I lingered, allowing the warmth and nourishment to settle into me. The old woman returned and placed a hand on mine, a gesture of solidarity I had not expected. "Remember," she said softly, "even the smallest steps forward matter. Even one step is enough to carry you through the next." Her words stayed with me as I stepped back into the street, the city bright under the morning sun. I wandered toward the outskirts, where buildings thinned in the air carried the scent of earth and distant flowers. There, I discovered a small garden tucked behind a row of houses, carefully tended by an elderly man who hummed to himself as he worked. I watched him for a while, marveling at the patience and care with which he nurtured the plants, noticing the way his hands moved deftly among the soil, coaxing life from it with gentle insistence. He looked up and smiled at me. "Do you like gardens?" he asked. I nodded softly. "Yes, they remind me of home." He chuckled. "Home is wherever we tend it, care for it, nurture it, love it. It grows." I joined him, hesitantly at first, learning the rhythm of watering, pulling weeds, and tending the plants. The work was quiet and steady, and for hours I felt a sense of purpose I had feared lost forever. Each plant I nurtured became a small reminder that life could still be shaped by care and attention, even after loss and betrayal. By the time I stepped away, my hands were dirt-stained, my back ached pleasantly, and my heart felt lighter than it had in days. The city around me began to slow as evening approached, shadows stretching across streets and alleyways. I wandered further, passing small shops and houses, some well-kept, others worn by time. I paused at a thrift store window, admiring stacks of books and a jumble of coats. Behind the pile of novels, a small, scruffy dog peeked at me, tail wagging. I smiled, and it barked softly, inviting me closer. The shopkeeper noticed. "She's shy, but friendly," he said. "Likes quiet people." I knelt, letting the dog sniff my fingers. She licked them once, twice, and I laughed quietly, a sound that felt unfamiliar yet comforting. Perhaps life could still offer companionship in unexpected forms, even when everything I once held dear had shifted or slipped away. By nightfall I returned to the streets, legs weary, yet my spirit buoyed by the day's discoveries. I found a bench overlooking the river, watching as the last golden light of sunset shimmered across the water. And for the first time in what felt like weeks, I allowed myself a small measure of hope. Perhaps there would be work, shelter, or friendship. Perhaps life had not abandoned me entirely. As I sat, I thought of my children again, of the house I had lost, of the love that had once filled every corner of my life. The ache remained tender and persistent, but it no longer felt insurmountable. I had survived the night, walked through the day, and discovered that even in small moments the world could offer kindness and connection. Perhaps tomorrow and the day after would bring more of the same. And perhaps, step by step, I could reclaim a sense of belonging, even if it looked nothing like the life I had once known. Night had settled over the city, folding the streets into shadow and quiet. I remained on the bench by the river a while longer, watching the dark water reflect the faint glimmer of distant streetlights. The chill crept into my bones, and yet I could not bring myself to leave. The river had a rhythm that spoke to me, a quiet persistence that reminded me that life continued whether I followed it or not. I thought of all I had lost, my husband, my children's affection, the home I had built with such care. And yet, in the midst of sorrow, I felt a faint ember of resolve. Perhaps this was what survival truly meant, walking forward step by step, even when the path is unknown, even when the world seems determined to turn its back on you. I clutched my small bag closer, the few belongings it held now more precious than ever, and I whispered to myself that I would not let despair claim me entirely. As I sat in the darkness, I considered the countless nights I had endured for others. I had sacrificed my hunger for my children's satisfaction, my sleep for their comfort, my pride for their dignity. And though those acts had left me vulnerable now, stripped of security and love, they had also forged a resilience I could not have anticipated. I realized that my strength had been with me all along, quietly enduring, quietly waiting for the moment when I would need it most. The city around me seemed to slow with the night. Occasionally, a distant car rumbled along the streets, its headlights glancing off buildings and water. A stray cat padded along the sidewalk, pausing briefly to regard me before continuing its silent patrol. Even in the small, overlooked moments, I felt a connection to the living world, a subtle reminder that I was still part of something larger, something enduring. Finally, I rose, my legs protesting the effort, and began to wander again. The night was cool, the air sharp against my cheeks, yet I welcomed the motion. Movement was survival, and I intended to survive. I wandered through quiet streets, past closed shops and darkened houses, listening to the faint hum of the city and the whisper of the wind through the trees. Each step was deliberate, a small victory over the inertia of despair that threatened to settle into my bones. I passed by a small church, its doors closed, but a single light shone through the stained glass, casting colors onto the sidewalk. I paused there, considering whether to knock, to ask for shelter or counsel, but pride held me back. I did not want to beg. I wanted to walk forward with the dignity I had left. And so I moved on, the glow of the church fading behind me, a silent beacon reminding me that even in darkness light persisted somewhere. As the hours passed, I found myself on the outskirts of the city where the buildings thinned and the streets became quieter. Here, the air carried a faint scent of earth and distant gardens, a gentle reminder of life beyond concrete and asphalt. I paused to breathe deeply, letting the cool air fill my lungs and the faint hope fill my heart. Perhaps tomorrow, or the day after, would bring something. A stranger's kindness, a small opportunity, a path forward I could not yet see. By the time the city fully slumbered, I found a bench beneath a tree whose branches swayed softly in the night breeze. I sat, my bag at my feet, and allowed exhaustion to settle over me. Though the night was lonely, though the ache of loss was persistent, I felt the first delicate stirrings of hope. Survival was no longer only about enduring. It was about discovering that life, even in its smallest forms, still had something to offer. And so, my dear, that is where part one leaves me, sitting under the night sky, clutching my small bag, the world vast and uncertain around me, yet with a quiet determination to continue. I do not know what tomorrow holds, nor the days after, but I do know that I will meet them, step by step, breath by breath, with the resilience that comes from a life of love, sacrifice, and enduring hope. If you've enjoyed this story so far, please press the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you don't miss part 2 of my journey.